Okay, under 3, new business, a presentation of Scenic Byway application request by Strafford Regional Planning Commission. That's you.
Good evening, my name is Cynthia Copeland. I'm with Strafford Regional Planning Commission, and I'm here to talk about the proposal about the Mills Scenic Byway. And so I thought this map might be appropriate to understand what was behind the Scenic Byways proposal. And so, as you can see here, this is our tidal watersheds, and it goes out to Great Bay, and here's the Lamprey River, and here's the Oyster River, and the Bellamy, and the Cochico, and the Salmon Falls. And you can see that this route starts at 108 in Newmarket, and it goes up through Newmarket and down through the downtown with the mills. And it comes up 108 and into Durham and through their historic mills district and the mill pond there. And then it turns at the light and it comes up and goes through Madbury. And then it goes across the 108 where the Bellamy Sawyer mills are. And then down through the downtown with the large mill complex. And then out Route 4. And then it cuts off here and it comes into the mill district in Rollinsford. So essentially what this does is, by looking at this, it shows each of these, Rollinsford and Dover, the 2 rivers here, and Durham, it shows that the mills are part of a historic process where originally people came in and they went up the rivers as far as they could, and so all of these mills are located at the confluence of the saltwater and the freshwater, and where there was a change in elevation and hydropower was possible, and so you started to get shipbuilding and cutting down of masts. The masts would come in and they'd head out and out to the sea and out through Portsmouth, down the Piscataqua and down, and then you got larger mills, and the mills worked upstream. And so if you read the history of all the different towns, it's about the history, hundreds of years of mills along, and hydropower along our in our area. And so then in the 1800s you get different development, and you start to get the cotton and the silk and mills in, and the shoes later on. And so it's a history of economic development and the cultural and historic values of the region. So that was the premise. That was one premise of looking at this, is all of these communities shared one thing in common. They were where the confluence came, where you could start hydropower on a level that would have very large development. And so our communities, we've been working on this project for several years, and the communities all along here have been doing different efforts to restore their downtowns or various aspects of their communities. And they were asking, well, what can we do to market ourselves to outside entities? We'd like to bring some cash in and have people go to the Children's Center, the Children's Museum, go to our downtown businesses, go out to eat, stay overnight. How do we build some interest in this, and how do we market ourselves? So one vehicle to do this is a very simple scenic byway, which I'll get into later. but it's a way to pull together all of these communities, Rollinsford, Dover, Durham and Newmarket. Madbury doesn't have any mills here, but they were willing to participate in it because it just sort of, the route just crosses through. So everyone along had similar interests. They were working on downtown redevelopment, and they all had something in common. So I drive this route every day. I've driven it every day for 13 years, and it's beautiful. And it's just an absolutely lovely drive. And so I looked through different ways of how you could build some interest in this area and people could work together and have some commonalities. And so we looked at the Scenic Byways program, and the majority of the communities along the way were interested in pursuing it further. Yes?
Cynthia, that road, red line you got there,
Yes,
that's an existing road?
that's 108.
108?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was a boundary or...
No, that's 108, I'm sorry. So this is 108 at the Newfields border, and it just comes up here, crosses the lamprey at the bridge there, the Veterans Bridge, and it continues on up through here. That's the stoplight where the Durham Historic District is, and the courthouse, and it turns here and it crosses, where's 4, right here, and crosses the Oyster River. This is the primary Oyster, this is a tributary, and then it goes up through the sort of rolling hills and on into the Bellamy and Cocheco.
No.
And then Dover was interested in including the downtown area as well, so that the entire, because of the one-way pattern that exists right now, they were interested in having the entire downtown. So at any point along this, the idea is most of the marketing of these scenic byways is done by web. People look at the website and they go on and they look at it and they say, well, that looks interesting, and they can read the descriptions. There's usually marketing that goes along with this, and you describe what's along the route, what they'll see, where they can stop, what restaurants are there, what shops, what buildings. It's about marketing your communities to bring in dollars to help the local economy. So that was the premise behind it, as simple as that. So now I could talk about...
I got another question.
Yes.
All this shopping's gonna take place in the towns themselves?
All the what?
Well, it sounds like you're making one long strip mall.
No, but let me hand out the... It's not a strip mall, it's just, you put, a sign would go up here, and it would say, whatever the name of it is right now, the Mills Scenic Byway, and then there'd be another one maybe up here, and then another one here and here. That's all you would visually see, is the sign. So there's no, I don't understand. If you want to explain a bit more, I don't understand.
Well, you were talking about commercialism and shops doing business.
That's existing shops.
Okay.
So everything I mentioned is existing. So there's a new restaurant where I ate last night that opened up in Newmarket. They'd love to have people interested in coming in and stopping and spending some time here, and then going up to Durham and spending some time, going to Dover and spending some time. So,
John, it would be like 1A going down through Newcastle with the little green sign along the side of the road.
all right, thank you. Okay, so right now we're just going to talk about the program overview. I wanted to just give you a basic background of why this started. So now we're going to switch gears a bit, and we're going to talk about the National and State Scenic Byway Program. So if you flip the page over to this first page, so it talks about the National Scenic Byway Program. And does anyone mind if I just put this down here so I don't flap that around? So I think what's really important here is where you read on the title there, it says, a collection of American roads, their stories and treasured places. And really this is what this is about. It's about the story of how these different communities and this part of New Hampshire and the seacoast, how it developed on this side of Great Bay, and what were the industries, and when did they come in, and who was involved, and what were the ramifications of that. And just as it says, it's a treasured place. So for many people that have lived here for their entire lives, or have family that have been in the region, or can say that they're actually ancestors that have lived here for this time, it's an opportunity to pull this together along with your historic districts and your conservation commission and your recreation interests, and tell your story about Dover, about Durham, about Rollinsford, about Newmarket, and have a way to make those cohesive so that it attracts other interests. So the National Scenic Byways Program, it's a federal program, and it was authorized under the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. It's what the acronym for that is ISTEA, I-S-T-E-A. So that's when it was first authorized, and then it was reauthorized again in 1998. And I took all of this information from these websites that are listed here, so you can just go to those websites. It's very simple, and just find out all of the information that I've provided for you. And you know, here's the America Byways, the logo, the New Hampshire Scenic and Cultural Byways, and then the national one through the federal highways. And the mission is to create a collection, a distinctive collection of American roads. And then the mission through the funding source is to provide resources so these communities here could create unique travel experiences, and at the same time you're enhancing your local quality of life. So, you know, as we've been researching this program and working with all the different historic districts and conservation commissions, myself personally and staff have been learning about our region and the towns in it, and what makes Dover unique, what's special about Dover, what's special about Durham, what people take pride in, and then looking to see how do those meld together, and how can you do a collaborative effort that benefits all. All right, so the New Hampshire Scenic, on the next page, one down, New Hampshire Scenic and Cultural Byway Program, that was established in 1992, and there's the RSA reference there. And it pretty much repeats the objectives and authorization and mission of the federal program. And the legislation also established the program and a council that's appointed by the governor, and this is the Scenic and Cultural Byways Council. And they're the advisory body to the program for the state of New Hampshire. And this program used to be administered through the New Hampshire Office of State Planning, and then the Office of Energy and Planning, and now it's administered by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, the Bureau of Planning and Community Assistance, and the state coordinator is Dean Eastman, and Bill Watson is the bureau chief for that, and they're both willing to come and talk to the city of Dover. So then I have Dean Eastman's email address there. I have a screenshot of their state website, and then all of the information you need there, and some tours that you can go on and see what they look like. So then we start looking at the National Scenic Byway Program has 3 levels of designation. So there's all American roads, and there's only 31 of these nationally. And one that I listed there was Route 66. There's also the Las Vegas Strip, the Florida Keys. Those are all roads that people think about, and well, the Strip would be interesting, but it is unique. So, and then we have, so those are the premier roads in the country, and they're outstanding and attract people from all over the world to come and see them. And then the second level is the National Scenic Byways, and there's 120 of those, and there's 3 in New Hampshire. So you can see the Connecticut River Byway and the White Mountain Trail and the Kankamanka Scenic Byway, which I don't know about you, but whenever I have visitors from out of state, I take them on one of those 3 roads and we go for a ride along with everyone else, and it's just beautiful. A lot of the pull-outs on the road there where you can pull off on the side and look at the road were funded through this program. So we'll get into later how much money has been spent in New Hampshire on this. So state scenic byways, there's 14 in New Hampshire, and 3 are in the lakes and seacoast region. So the one that goes along the coast is called the Coastal Byway, obviously, and the one that is in Hampton and Exeter, which goes to the Independence Museum, is called the Independence Byway. And then up in Milton, Milton Mills, and Wakefield is the Branch River Valley Scenic Byway. So there's over 1,000 miles of these byways in New Hampshire. So if we go down to the question, which, was it you, Peter? The head, how does it connect? Who had that question about how they connect? Okay, so we go to this proposed scenic byway route and the connecting loop. So this Mills Byway, the 16.3 miles from the Newfields town line up to the state line, is 16.3 miles. And the Coastal Byway out on green on this one where you see Newcastle, Rye, Northampton, all the way down to Seabrook to the Mass border, that's 18.5 miles. And then Independence Way is somewhat of a loop, and that's 21 miles, and that's in Hampton going over to Exeter down to East Kingston, and that is in red. And the goal that we were looking at was in Exeter at the Independence Museum on 27 is connecting out through Newfields, Exeter and Newfields on, oh help me, is it 85? And connecting through there to 108 so that we'd have a connector there. And then over in Berwick, the towns in Maine and the Regional Planning Commission in that area in southern Maine are looking at connecting out to Portsmouth, and then you would have through Kittery and across the bridge when they're done, and then you'd have this very large loop where you'd be able to use that to market and attract, to pull people in, so that they're not just coming to New Hampshire to go to the coast, but they're coming to New Hampshire to go inland to the western side of Great Bay and to the inland communities that we've shown here. Are there any questions? Okay. All right, so the nomination process. So now we have a really nice picture of one of the mills in Dover. So nominations must demonstrate state and or regional significance of the intrinsic qualities of the byways. And listed over here are what the intrinsic qualities are. So that's scenic, natural resources, historic, cultural, archaeological, and recreational. And so in order to do that, what we did was contact all of the communities along the corridor or who had said that they were interested in being a part of this and ask them, all right, so where are your scenic resources along this route, your natural, your historic, and we started to build an inventory of these qualities and characteristics. On the nominating process, it's a process of planning to, what it is the communities coming together and working as an advisory committee, as the Byways Committee, and the purpose is to support preservation, enhancement, and promotion of these resource qualities that we've addressed up there. And I will demonstrate some of these in some of the slides and coming up. And then planning a good quality visitor experience and providing community and organizational support for the byway. Any questions at this point? All right, so one of the questions people have is, well, what type of money is available for these programs? So a lot of the work that's done is just the byway committee from the various communities meeting together and working out a collaborative efforts to support the byway and to market it. Since '92, approximately $560,000 annually has been available in New Hampshire, and the grant activities that are eligible are preparing a corridor management plan, safety improvements, byway facilities, access to recreation like a parking lot, resource protection like conservation easements, purchasing of interpretive information and marketing. So you can see on the funding, over 3,000 projects have been funded, and in New Hampshire, over $11 million has been spent between '92 and 2011. In 2011, 123 projects were funded, and in New Hampshire, there were 2 projects funded, and the vast majority of that, over $1 million, went to the development of a pull-out area and along one of the trails in the North Country to provide safe parking and access for people. All right, so now we're looking at the proposed route. So I think I've covered most of this. The process would be to set up joint meetings with the corridor communities and to form an advisory committee. And once there was agreement on the document, then they would submit the nomination to DOT for their processing and review by the advisory council, and it's the advisory council that actually signs off and signifies that it's a scenic byway. And the next step after that is to prepare a corridor management plan. A corridor management plan inventories the route and sets strategies to manage the resources and qualities. So the general requirements are that it be a written plan developed through community involvement, provide for conservation and enhancement of the qualities of the byway, address promotion of tourism and other economic development, and identify strategies to balance any concerns while providing for the user's enjoyment. And these are emphasized, these are community-based and living documents. That means they change over time, and they outline goals, strategies, and responsibilities. So here, any questions on that? Okay. So here are some examples of historic resources in Dover. So we've named some of them, and then we have pictures, and so these descriptions show pretty much what would be in the byway nomination and in the document for marketing, probably in another format, but however, this information was provided by staff from the city of Dover. Then you see recreational resources. Please, if anybody sees any mistakes, please let us know if we've not described things absolutely accurately. And then we have natural and scenic resources. So this gives you a really good idea of what is along this Mills Byway, and there are hundreds of resources in these 5 communities. It's a very rich proposal. We've learned so much about the communities, and you can look here at the recreational resources to give you an idea. Okay, cultural resources. Just in Dover, you have the Children's Museum, the Woodman McConnell Center, the Public Library. You know, so that's one aspect. And then going to a different, we look at physical conditions. So we look at traffic volume. So as part of our work, we regularly do, when you see the tubing out on the roads, we are collecting traffic counts. And so we're in process right now of doing our yearly traffic count program. We also do turning movement assessments as requested by city police departments and town police departments and DOT. Economic development staff in some of the cities asked us to collect information on turning movement and amount of traffic. So we regularly have that. We collected data at 17 points along this. Some of them are our regular collection sites, and some of them were specified by city and town staff. And then as another part of our regular workload that we do, we look at traffic speed and accident data. So this is a normal process for us to look at this. So we contacted the Dover Police Department and asked for a review of the crash data and citation. So you can see, you know, speeding and citations and warnings for various years, how many there were. Where the problematic highest frequency areas were, where the collisions were, and where the highest amount were. So this is a normal part of our workload that we do with the Department of Transportation and the local municipalities to do transportation planning in the region, as well as with the transit providers in the region, Wildcat and Coast. Looking to the next section on existing road signs and levels of service. So in December, we went out and did a sign inventory for the entire byway. So we geocoded the points for warning, regulatory, guide, and directional signs. So those are all geocoded now and available to any community for them to look at for their needs, like meetings that you have here and questions that you have. Just to reiterate, commercial enterprises are clustered in downtown Dover, Newmarket, and Durham. There were additional signs along the corridor, and these consisted mainly of guide, recreation, and cultural interest signs. And to the left there you see a photo of a recreational sign, a boating ramp that's open to the public. So we conducted 2 inventories to determine the level of service for pedestrian and bike traffic, and we used a level of service calculator, and we made assessments to generate information relative to pedestrian and bicyclist comfort and safety for the segments of the proposed byway. So the calculator uses variables such as shoulder width, road width, traffic volume and classification, pavement condition, speed limit, and percentage of sidewalk to estimate. So again, this is a normal part of our work. We collect this data and information regularly because that's what we do as transportation planners. Another area that they asked us to look at is land use distribution and conservation activities. So what this found is that the area, when you look along the land use distribution, and this is where you get into the question of the quarter-mile area on either side of the road. So what they asked us to do by the designation process was to look at the road and then a quarter mile on each side and look and see what type of land use was along the byway. And so what it found was that roughly 46% of the land within a half mile consists of forest and agricultural lands. And so the concentrations of residential and commercial land use are pretty much focused in the downtown areas, and the rest of the land use along this proposed byway is forested, rural, residential, and agricultural land. It also asks us to look at what type of conservation activities are occurring within, and so we gave examples here of what the conservation activities are in the town of Newmarket. So you can see these involve things where people might be interested, like the Heritage Festival, the Apple Festival, annual fishing derby, supporting Eagle Scout projects, monitoring town-owned conservation areas, providing educational materials. Newmarket has a park, conservation park down at the town landing that's available to the public with a boat ramp and the only fishing weir left in the whole state. So these are all things that are of interest to people both in the public here and town and city residents, but also people who would like to come in and see the area. So for more information, I think this is a stunning picture of downtown Dover in the fall. This tells you right there. And Kyle Pimentel is our regional planner, and he's been working on this process. It's his project that he's been working on. And then for your benefit, there's been questions about New Hampshire legislation. So from Title 20, Transportation on the highway programs, I included the section that concerns the scenic and cultural byway system, so that if you have any questions, you can look at that. So, are there any questions?
Anybody?
Oh, Copeland, C-O-P-E-L-A-N-D.
You mentioned putting together a committee of the communities that are involved in this. Is that something that's going to be led at the staff level, the committee? Do you know? Or is it too early to tell, really?
No, it would be the selectmen, the town council, city council appointing someone or assigning someone to be on that. That's normally the process for it.
Anybody else? I do. I have a number. When this was presented to the city council, we tabled it because there was some concern about the buffer zone and eminent domain. Can you speak to that?
The Scenic Byway is the route, the road. There is no buffer. The corridor management plan is a planning process that looks at what is the context that this route travels through. So when someone comes from out of state or from Manchester, someone who doesn't know the region, or someone at the advisory council level is looking at this, they can get a flavor of what this route is actually like. And so this gives them the context of what the road traverses through. What will people see? What kind of traffic will there be? Are they going to be going through industrial zones? Are they going to be in downtown areas? Are they going to have traveling along the coast, along rivers? What is it that, and so all of this is just to give the view of the route that someone would take when they were on this. That's the part about the buffer. The buffer's there just as a study unit. Does that make sense? I just want to
It does kind of, but I mean, I was there when Mr. Parker made his presentation, And he also addressed eminent domain on some properties. And when I had spoke up, and because I had never really heard of this, I mean, I've done a lot of Google and research since then, and my concern, I guess, would be amplified now, that there is a part that's in there that talks about eminent domain. And so it's, why would they even have reference to eminent domain of properties? Because when I'm looking at your statistics as far as coming that 46% is agriculture or forest or
Forested.
whatever, and I'm looking from Newmarket to, I guess you're going down into town, there's a lot of development. I'm not sure where the 46%, or was that 46% for Newmarket?
No, that was the entire route.
The entire route, okay.
Yes, the entire route is 40% forested or agriculture or water. There's some
Okay.
marshlands along there. The eminent domain, where did you see in the literature about eminent domain?
Mr. Parker presented it to the city council. He made reference because there was some speakers that had gotten up, and it was basically, he talked about grants, you know, and another condition, a question I would have is what are the conditions of the grants? Like, it seems like every time we get grants within the city, there's some kind of conditions that go to them. You know, so are there any conditions that go along with these possible grants?
Without, this is hard to say, without having been present at the meeting and knowing the question and Chris's response on eminent domain, I really not sure how to respond to that other than to say that eminent domain exists in state, federal, and municipal law, and I have not heard someone using it for those purposes on a scenic byways in this state in the last 13 years that I've been here. But how did they put in the parking lot up there on the trails for the $1.something million project that just went in? There had to have been a purchase and sales agreement. I don't know how they authored that and put that package together.
It's okay, I'll go back and I'll review that tape to get exactly how it was said, but at that point, when he made that introduction about the eminent domain, a lot of people started to squirm, and that's why on the council level it got tabled. You know, it's because there was some questions. Okay.
And normally, when we work with projects with DOT, there's a willing buyer and seller. The buyer is New Hampshire DOT or the town or the city or a private individual, and there's federal funds, state funds, local funds, private funds going into the project. You know, if we're doing a transportation enhancement project like a bridge in downtown Dover or in Newmarket where they have the pedestrian sky bridge, that was an agreement between the planning board and the developer as a condition of approval, and then it went forward and they applied for federal funds through transportation enhancements, and it's 80% federal, 20% state or local or private. So I don't see why this process would be any different than any other process, and I haven't seen in 13 years an eminent domain project go through our region. So,
Okay, good. John?
Why do they mention a quarter mile on either side of the road?
because that's a general, when we do corridor management, so for instance, we had an engineering firm come in and do a corridor study on 125, and the general standard is a quarter mile on either side of the road is what you do for corridor management. So if you were to look at 125, our corridor plan, you could come in and you would see all the data collected for a half mile, a quarter mile on each side of the road. So if it's a 4-lane road, it's the 4 lanes and a quarter of a mile or a quarter of a mile. It's just the context of how we do corridor management planning. You need to know the context in which the road is moving. So on 125, you're looking at who's generating traffic, where is traffic flowing to? Is it going to the landfills? Is it going to employment centers? Is it going to commercial sites? Is it through commuting traffic? Is it going down to, trucks coming up from Massachusetts? So you do that and you generate the numbers on how much traffic is being generated within this half-mile wide swath.
Well, it's not like when the interstate highway system came in, they just said, get out of the way, we're coming. And there's been a lot of neighborhoods to this day that are just.
The Scenic Byway program is about going right back to the very beginning. It's a collection of American roads, their stories, and what it is that people treasure about these roads.
I thought of an example. I
Yes.
think this came up at that meeting, and because you said it, corridor management, and you made the reference to it's a community-based living document,
Yes,
and it changes with time.
yes,
So if you have a road that's going, and you have a half-mile buffer or a quarter-mile buffer on each side.
it's not a buffer.
Well, it's referred to, when you go online, they're always called a buffer. So if you want to take it, the management program,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden you're gonna take that 2-lane road, make it 4-lane road, so now you're,
No, it's within, so if you were to look at our Route 125 corridor management plan, excuse me please, if you were to look at the corridor management plan for Barrington, on some locations it talks about increasing from a 2-lane road to a 3-lane with a left-hand turn lane. The half-mile corridor that we studied within stays the same. If you made that a 4-lane road, the half-mile corridor stays the same. It's not in the sense of buffer, in the sense that you look at wetlands are here and we have to go out however many feet, whatever your city regulation is about setting, feet from a prime wetlands or something. It's not like that at all. It's what is the context, I keep saying it, but what is the context that this road is within? What's going to generate traffic? What's going to pull people to commute through? Our people want to go from Massachusetts up to 16 and get on the Spalding? That's what we're looking at. What's going to draw people and how is that going to affect the through flow of traffic and people making turning movements and going different places? So does that help? So it's not a buffer in the sense that you would think of it's a wetland with a buffer. It's, somebody's property, a zoning, whatever your zoning reg is, and how, you have to have so many feet distance. This is just a study term for understanding what it is, the world that this road is in, and what's it like now and what's it going to be like in the future.
okay, I'll just have to go back and listen to it.
Okay,
Because
that would
I
be
know
great.
we had some state legislators that came and it wasn't really endorsed, but I can't remember the specific reason
Okay.
why some of them.
I would be glad to. I just don't want to.
Who were the legislators that came?
I don't remember. Were you there when Chris Parker brought that?
No.
I just gotta go back and listen to it again because it was a little bit back.
Yeah, and I just want to be fair to Chris and to the city council and also to the people that were present and eminent domain, people
That was a
get
huge,
a little,
that was a huge
they
issue.
get concerned and I want to be able to answer it appropriately and correctly, so.
Are you going to planning board tomorrow night? Or is no?
I didn't know, I didn't think Chris hasn't spoken to me about anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It's coming soon to the planning board, but I wasn't aware when.
Well, we'd be glad to be there if invited, so thank you.
So can I ask you, thank you for this. What's being asked of us here?
To endorse it, I guess, is from what Chris Parker, his email was.
So why is it going to the city council as well? Does the city council have to approve this, or
So
what are they approving?
it's a letter of support for us to present this to New Hampshire DOT and the State Advisory Council for them to review the information and see if it's worthy of inclusion as a scenic byway in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more information for us because where it is a transportation issue that, anybody else?
I don't think of anything offhand.
Okay.
All of the questions already came out.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Cynthia. The question I have is on the last page.
Yes.
Generally speaking, this a designation of a scenic byway would prohibit billboards or advertising devices as they're defined in the statute. Basically, there's no prohibition on-premise signs, business signs, etc.,
No.
either existing or proposed. But generally speaking, the billboard type signs that we see advertising products or services or other.
With the exception that, number 3, advertising devices erected before the effective date of this section may be maintained.
Correct.
So in planning parlance, that's grandfathered. So if they're there right now, they stay. On-premise are and directional, informational, or official signs may be erected in or maintained, and those are all subject to the rules and regulations of each municipality. So whatever Dover does, continues to do. Whatever Newmarket does, Newmarket continues to do. So that process stays exactly the same.
In your experience, whose responsibility is it to enforce this provision on scenic byways? Does each municipality have the responsibility? Like, say one day I drove into work and I noticed a new billboard was up and this had been designated a scenic byway. Is it the municipality's responsibility to follow through on that, or is there does the Department of Transportation generally inventory and oversee the signs on the roadways, on the scenic byways?
I would
your
imagine
experience?
that it would be start with a conversation that you would make to Dean Eastman at New Hampshire DOT and ask for advice about what to do in this situation. At least that's how I would proceed, and that's what I normally do, is just contact whoever the program person is and explain the situation and ask their advice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What's to prevent this from becoming one long strip mall like 125?
Well, that would be subject to the town and city regulations.
So there's
Not
nothing.
a thing changes on that.
That 125 is so bad, I tell people not to even use it. The place is a death trap.
Well, so,
There's a lot of ignorant people going up and down 125 all the time, I guess.
Well, you've got a lot of
I guess that's why I stopped commuting there, right, Peter?
curb cuts.
I avoid it whenever possible. You just never know when you're going to get killed out there.
So, your question's a really good question, because I didn't understand when you were asking what prevents this from becoming a strip mall, and the answer is what I said at first, is nothing changes on your subdivision, your site plan regulations, your zoning ordinance, all of that stays exactly the same.
I think it's much more likely not to become a strip mall if one of these situations is in place, as opposed to just leaving it open to the kind of development you see on 125, where somebody buys something up, puts something up, it's there.
But you still have your regulations from planning, so I don't think the byway would be affected, or have an effect on that development anyway, because she just said that.
Seemed to
you
me
still
that-
have
But
your
it has a
regulations.
subconscious effect, because the idea is that the whole idea of the byway program is to designate this corridor that says it has an intrinsic historic and cultural value. So even though you still have your planning regulations and you have to leave it up to the development of the community, people are going to think, oh, that's a really nice road, we don't want, what can we do to prevent, a second target on that road or whatever.
It's always state law. last page is an RSA,
Yeah. Oh, no, I know, I can read it.
just
Anybody
for
else?
everybody else. Everybody else.
Questions?
It's already law.
Okay, everybody here first? Done? I just want to make sure the board.
Okay,
Okay, Mary?
great. You mentioned that the communities approached the Strafford Regional Planning Commission about what they wanted to do. I'd be interested in seeing copies of the correspondence and the letters that you received from those folks indicating their interest in asking.
There
what they
is
could do.
none.
How did they communicate with you then? Did they
Verbally.
communicate with you
Verbally.
personally?
Yes.
Because my impression from the different communities, and I've spoken with a number of them, is that the Strafford Regional Planning Commission has been pursuing them. It's not as if they came and said, what can we do? It's the Strafford Regional Planning Commission coming to them saying, we have money, would you like it?
I think I've explained earlier that the communities have been asking us for tools to market their downtowns, to get people to come in to their restaurants, to their museums, to their businesses, and they were looking for tools. And so one of the tools that we found, and this isn't the only one of the tools that we found is the Scenic Byways. And because of the very thing that it didn't have any regulatory changes, it didn't have any zoning ordinance changes, that it was an inventory process, a communication and building a plan process, that it brought people together in a collaborative effort, that this was an ideal tool for the communities to be looking at because there was so little change in how they did business normally.
In theory, it sounds good.
Yes.
but I still have my reservations I
Okay.
had from our council meeting.
I guess the other point, a couple of other points, I just wanted to make the board aware that, I'm sorry that it wasn't included in the packet, the letter that Dover would have to sign, that the mayor would have to sign off on, because it very specifically said in there that the city would commit to enacting ordinances or legislation at the local level that would protect the byway, if you will. And one of the things that I believe that would include, you mentioned a few of the things that you inventoried, but if you look at the highway department's own information, I got this offline, a community guide to planning and managing a scenic byway. This was produced by the Federal Highway Administration. It's their own documentation about these byways. And here are some of the things that they inventory. And I'd like you to think about, if it's just the roadway we're talking about, why are we doing a quarter mile? I know it's a context, but think about what they're inventorying and think about what we would have to do as a community to enact legislation to preserve these types of things. They look at air quality, archaeological and historical items, bicycling, commercial signs, contamination sites, detours, erosion control, farmland, fire control, fisheries, floodplains, groundwater, geological resources, land use, recreational resources, social and economic resources, stream modification, soils, threatened and endangered species, vegetation, visual quality, water quality, wetlands, wild and scenic rivers, and wildlife. And perhaps you can elaborate a little bit, but I know
Yes.
if you go onto the New Hampshire DOT site and you look at who's responsible for overseeing and making sure all those intrinsic qualities that you talked about, recreation and scenic and historic, that is the state, that the control is at the state level. It's no longer at the local level once you sign on to the byway. I've seen that in the literature, so would you comment on that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to tell you that, yes, we are doing exactly what Federal Highways has asked us to do, and we are inventorying all of those characteristics and data collection, and that's a part of our normal job. We've been doing that for 30 plus years now. So I'm sorry that's a surprise to you, but I'm hoping that you understand that that's part of what just like land use planning in the city of Dover or the town of Durham, you collect information on geological resources, water resources, flooding, the type of land use, how many people, the demographics, the traffic counts, and you put all of that together, and that's what you use to form your policies and your regulations and ordinances. And so air quality, yes, we run an air quality model. We've been running it since the state was found in non-attainment for ozone. So we've been doing that for decades. We're just moving into a maintenance because our ozone is now meeting federal standards. So that's really good news for us. So
Obviously, we did something right.
we've done something right, and we have amazing transit. We have, we're one of the few places in the country with the low density level like we have that have 2 transit, an inner city bus system, and the most successful Amtrak business in the country through the Downeaster. And given that our population base is about 146,000 in this region, us having 2 public transit, an inner city bus, and rail service is a miracle, and very much due to the hard work and planning that's been going on for decades to get this in place for everyone. So your second part of the question was?
Sorry, I don't remember that. I just have one more question and
But
just a brief
I think it
comment.
was an important question, and
Oh, the DOT being responsible because we, as representatives, elect our council,
Yeah.
and we can hold them accountable because we elect them. We have no say once DOT comes in, and it's in the literature that they are the responsible body for making sure that those intrinsic qualities are maintained. And I know that Kyle has said that, no, it wasn't Kyle, it was in the literature, is that the maintenance costs are the responsibility of the communities. The government will not put that money in. So whatever the government gives us, and it's money we have to pay up front, and they reimburse us, and you didn't mention that, but we no longer have the control, and if they come in and they say, you're not keeping up your resources, you've got to spend the money to do that, then that's a whole different ballgame than we're talking about.
Okay, so when the Surface Authorization Act went through, that put into place metropolitan planning organizations, of which we are one. And the purpose of putting these metropolitan planning organizations in place was exactly what you were saying, was to ensure that there was a local bottoms-up voice present in the transportation planning process. And so that's actually the #1 priority of what we're mandated to do by federal law, is to ensure that there is a local voice and connection and process in transportation planning. They call it the 3 C's: continuous, cooperative, collaborative, and that's what we are assigned to do. The same 3 C's process exists for Coast, for DOT, and so your concern was addressed by creating entities, metropolitan planning organizations, whose goal and process was to gather the data, like the big list that you talked about, and do the modeling, and put together all of the pieces. And every 2 years, we go out and we do an official project solicitation where we meet with every single community and the providers, and we collect from them the information about their problems, congestion, a lot of areas where there's a lot of accidents, places where they have new growth going in and they want to expand the road. And then that whole process feeds into all of the state together into DOT, which goes to the governor, he signs off on it, and it goes to the legislature, and from there the 10-year plan is prepared, and that is New Hampshire's version of transportation planning with the federal guidelines and regulations incorporated into it. Now, there was a second part to your question.
Actually, I know others have questions. I just have a quick question and one comment, if I may. I know that Chris Parker testified to the council recently that we are no longer paying dues to the Strafford County Regional Planning Commission. sorry,
Yes.
Strafford Regional Planning Commission. So my question is, how much are we paying your entity for the services that you're doing with this byway? If we're not paying dues and that's not part of the service that we get.
0.
So you guys are doing this for free for us, because we're not a member technically anymore.
Technically, 80% is federal and 20% is required of our funding is required to be local or state, and we're using, the state offered us to use toll credits, and we've been using toll credits. And therefore, we can do our job.
Okay, and just my comment, I just want the board members to be aware, again, in this document that I was reading, one of the things that their inventory are things like eyesores along the byway, because not everything is beautiful and scenic. And one of the things they talk about in not only this document, but other documents, is that once your byway's in, you're gonna have to deal with those properties that are not aesthetically pleasing or that maybe don't really contribute to the view. And so please be aware that those types of properties, and I don't know who's gonna determine what's beautiful and what isn't, but those are going to be dealt with and mitigated and corrected. So you have to think about how would one accomplish that? And there was the issue, if you look at the literature, the ability for condemnation, the ability for eminent domain, the ability to enact zoning and regulation that would all of a sudden make something a non-conforming use or put you in a position where you have to fork over the money to now be part of this byway. So there's so much more than is here that is out there for you to seek, and we have started to do that. And I would urge this board to vote no on this. Thank you for letting me speak.
All right, Jack, you were at that meeting.
I was at the
I didn't see you sneak in here. I'm surprised to see you here, but you were at that
240
meeting.
pounds, unfortunately, by the way. Yeah, I was at the meeting, and I'm very concerned about all of the things that I'm hearing. I've got some questions, and I want to start with these first and then ask a couple others after. If I own property in the Scenic Byway, and I don't care if you use a quarter mile, half mile, I don't care what the distance is, and I can be a retail property owner, I can be, commercial property owner or a residential property owner, okay? What happens to my property over time? What's going to happen with this byway over time? How is it going to be determined what's going to happen over time? And what happens to virtually every property along the byway over time?
That would be a decision of the municipalities that were within it.
Meaning?
It would be business just like it is. I mean, if you owned property along the byway and you went to the City of Dover Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Adjustment and you had issues, you would have a discussion just like you would have today.
And if they told me that, Mr. Kimball, you can't do an addition on your home now because right now you're in the buffer zone, whatever you want to call it, of the Scenic Byway, what happens? What if I'm told if my house burns down, hey, well, you can't rebuild the house because you're in the byway? Or, for that matter, if a developer comes along and wants to buy my land because he wants to put in a supermarket or something, it doesn't fit into the byway concept, what happens?
Does zoning allow it, though?
I would just, I'm sort of dumbfounded because I'm a planner. And so I would be looking at the zoning ordinance and your subdivision and your site plan regs and the state regs that were applicable to it, and the answer would be found there, and they would take precedence over the scenic byways. The scenic byways has no regulatory authority.
Once,
Other than what you saw in the back page here about the advertising.
let's say Dover decides not to go along with this, across the board, what happens?
I don't know, I'll have to talk to the New Hampshire State DOT. The advisory council is looking for support from each community, and right now 4 communities, the legislative bodies have signed letters of support.
And those would be what, Madbury,
Madbury Board
Newmarket.
of Selectmen, Newmarket Town Council,
Durham?
Durham Town Council, and Rollinsford Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm. But Dover would be which, the last one?
Yes.
Yeah. Which maybe explains why, since we're not paying dues.
It
That's-
has
it pays
nothing
out.
to do with
You don't
that.
think it does?
No,
None
I
at
don't.
all?
No, absolutely not.
All right,
It was a scheduling issue that we were trying to work out with Chris. That's what why you were the last one, was scheduling.
the 108 corridor, which is the one we're talking about right now, what other potential corridors could we be talking about in the future? Do you know?
We're working with some communities with Southern on a shared one right now.
What was that?
We're working with Southern Regional Planning Commission in Manchester. We're working with them on a proposal right now. So,
This gentleman keeps, why don't you?
That's all right.
Let me ask you this question. What happens if it's determined that the byway needs an additional buffer area? What happens with that process? Let's say you need another eighth of a mile, a quarter of a mile, after this is approved.
so if we did the corridors byway, or if we did a corridor plan for 108, it's always going to be a quarter mile on each side until they change the science and technology about how large an area you need to study in order to create the right body of work to develop the right answers and policies on.
All right, so it's roughly a half a mile. Maybe,
Roughly
well,
a
plus or
half a
minus.
mile, yes.
And what you're saying is, if I'm hearing it correctly, is that the local zoning and planning ordinances would supersede anything that would come about with respect to the bylaw as far as property ownership.
Yes, the half mile wide has nothing to do with zoning or regulations. It's a study concept. So if your city was going to study the downtown and they said, all right, we're going to look at form-based code and how it's evolving over the last 4 to 5 years and what have been the impacts, and we're going to look at this area, and they would define a study area. Well, that's what this half mile is. It's the study area from which you collect the data. It's not a regulatory zone.
Isn't it kind of an inventory of what's
Yes.
there?
Yes.
But form-based code, we just extended the basis of form.
I mean,
Okay, maybe that was a
probably-
bad one. Okay,
yeah.
bad example. All right.
I was just trying to
Okay.
think of something that you could relate to, but you know, you've done zoning studies and you've done all different kinds of studies, and you make a study area and you draw a geographic line, and you say, okay, within this area, we're going to look at the following factors and collect information and build an inventory and an assessment. And then we're going to look and see how these different issues and data correlate or don't correlate with each other, and do they support our policies, and what is it that we're finding here? That's what it is. It's a study concept. Does that help?
I'm
It's so basic to what I do every day. I don't know how to explain
Yeah.
it to you.
I'm sure. No, I understand. You certainly have a lot of expertise in the area. I can tell. That doesn't take away the concern that I have, and it's major. Are you familiar with ICLEI?
Oh, Lord.
Oh, see,
Let
if
her
you
answer.
just said, "Oh Lord," okay, that tells me you are familiar with ICLEI, and
No,
and
let
that
her
the-
answer.
pardon?
Let her answer.
Okay.
I've heard that there's concern about it.
What, Hickley?
ICLEI.
I don't even know what you're talking about, okay?
I think Mr. Kimball could explain his concerns.
Well, what I'm here about, and my main concern is everything that's going on here, and some of you may not know it. I mean, I'm not sitting here to be accusatory, but you all are going to have to realize it's a major effort right now in the state legislature to shut down everything involving United Nations Agenda 21. And the Scenic Byway process and programs and everything that goes along with them is part of it. And I think many people, and I'm finding that out, even some city councilors who have gotten hold of me and just said they didn't know anything about it. Our job here, and I didn't know anything about it either until 3 months ago, so I'm just trying to tell you, I'm very well versed on it now. And I will not stop until such time as the whole process is eradicated. And as far as I'm concerned, and I want this to be on record, people have got to start becoming aware of the insidiousness of this. This is all started in 1991 with George H.W. Bush, and then activated, he signed on to it in Rio, and then it was activated by much more profound
Is this all
basis
on
by
videotape
Bill
too?
Clinton.
Is this being videotaped?
Yes.
Is it being videotaped, Rick?
I hope so.
Okay.
I wanted,
Is the camera on, Mr. Kimmel?
anyway. So what you need to realize is that this started in 1992, and it's been winding its way through our country and the states for quite some time, focused mostly on local municipalities, because those are the areas, quite frankly, that are the weakest insofar as having, because as far as I'm concerned, this is not only unconstitutional with respect to our federal constitution, but it's unconstitutional with respect to the state's constitution, particularly here in the live free or die state. So I just want it on record that that's what this is about, and this is what's going on. I'm asking all of you to just simply become more informed about this in the coming weeks. Put this, I would vote no on this for now, and get up to speed on what we're talking about here. I think it's essential. I think that's an objection. That's an objectionable way to handle it. And if you're objected, that is something this profound, a decision this profound, should not be made and taken lightly, and should be looked into heavily.
Well, then do it.
Did you have United Nations?
United Nations
21.
Agenda 21.
How did they get in on scenic roads?
Believe me, you'd like to find that out.
What was the
They
word?
did.
What was the word you said, ICLEI?
Quickly. That's an
It's an
acronym.
Yeah, okay, I what?
ICLEI. ICLEI. And to that, Google it tonight.
I will.
International Coalition
Karen?
of Local Ecological Initiatives.
Okay, I gotta give some other people some
Sure.
chances.
I'm fine.
I just would like to say for the record that I have a master's degree in natural resource management and public administration, and I'm a student of public administration, and I've been serving in public service since I got my master's, and that's been since 1976, and I would not do anything that would be a detriment to this country.
Knowingly,
This
I'm
certainly
positive.
is.
I'm not,
I would
and
love
I'm
to
not
have a
disparaging you
conversation
at
with
all.
you because
Knowingly, I think is the key.
I
word.
am very knowledgeable, sir.
Karen?
Well, maybe you guys can get together.
Sure. For the benefit of the board, I'd just like to reiterate, I'm getting the sense that we're all having trouble with this as some sort of policy that is going to change this road. At its simplest level, the Scenic Byways program designates a road as a scenic byway so that people who are not familiar with this area know that it's something neat that you can drive on and check out. If you've, I'm sure, all driven down 1A from Portsmouth through Newcastle and Rye, it's a lovely drive. People are still able to put new garages on their house. There are still new developments along that road. It's all still rooted in the same policies and ordinances that those communities had prior to it being designated a scenic byway. The scenic byway program, with the exception of the advertising as defined in the RSA, has no bearing on local ordinance unless the community itself says, well, because this scenic byway is important to us, we're going to change our ordinances around that road. We have digressed for an hour, and I have other things to do tonight. I'm sorry to be frank, but
Well, we're sorry to be
We're-
frank too, but this is a serious
excuse
situation.
me, Rick, I'm still speaking. Thank you.
Good,
um,
so.
You know, we're here as the Transportation Advisory Commission. This was an informational meeting. I think we've heard a lot of good dialogue and some different ideas, which are fine. But I'd like to put this to bed. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're talking about supporting the Planning Commission on studying an area, not changing policy, not preventing landowners from doing what is legal in their community. we're just talking about designating a scenic byway and being a welcoming participant along with our neighboring communities.
Karen?
I have to say that as a city councilor, and I'm gonna have to vote on this, for me, this is very good as far as information from everybody. And I couldn't recommend or not recommend until I see the letter of agreement, because I don't know exactly what it says on it. But on the surface, what you presented to me sounds good, but it's the other things that we've talked about that I still have the same apprehensions as I had at that city council meeting.
Right.
And now I'd just to ask one question. Jack, do you remember how long ago that meeting was?
About 3 weeks?
Yeah, about 3 weeks.
3 weeks? Tom was
Yeah.
there too.
So if every,
I wasn't actually.
Oh, you weren't,
I
that's
can
right.
email you the date.
okay,
You're in
if
trouble.
you go on to DoverNet TV and you go research through the resolutions, you'd be able to catch it. So I'm really sorry this took so long, and I hate to have you feel that you were put on
No,
on
I
the
don't
spot.
feel like that at all.
But I learned
Not
a
at
lot.
all.
I mean, I've
I'm
learned
glad.
a lot from all of this, and for myself, I can't commit to anything tonight, but if you guys wanna do something different, that's up to you. I don't know if this is something that we should table. I mean, I don't know.
I was under the impression that we were being asked for an action.
We were asked to make a recommendation according to Chris's letter that was read.
Chris emailed, said, if I am not there, my hope is that after the folks from Strafford Regional Planning speak to the scenic byways, maybe the TAC can vote on an endorsement to be sent to the council. There's no need to wait for me to be there, so the item should move forward. The item has been on a council agenda and was tabled for a workshop. We still plan on holding that, but thought the TAC could have some input as well.
It's fine. I just would encourage Mary and Jack and the others here, you have concerns, and Mary's already come to our office and worked with Kyle for over an hour and downloaded all of our data and took it home with her, and that was all free and clear. And you know, so if you want to come into our office by appointment so that we can be there and ready for you, you're welcome to come and we'll talk with you. Jack, we're willing to be educated, you know, but it's mutual. You know, I would like
and I
to.
think that's the way it should be.
Yes.
And I'm not,
I want to
believe
be
me, I'm not
respectful
trying to
here.
be insulting to you at all.
Not at
You're
all.
obviously very educated in your field. That's not what I'm here about. This is a big deal, and I think it is cross-education.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
John?
I'm on an open lands committee, and for a number of years, I've been trying to get roads in Dover be designated scenic roads. I don't know about this Agenda 21, but I know other communities like Fremont, they have scenic roads and they're out rural, and they're gonna be kept rural and scenic. A few years ago, we tried to get the back road designated a scenic road, and the city council shot it down because there's things like stone walls that can't be moved, telephone poles that can't be moved, and trees that can't be moved. And if I were on that road, I'd welcome it. But I don't want to cause anybody any hardship with this Agenda 21, and I'm still gonna try to promote scenic roads before we lose everything to asphalt and strip malls.
So, John, just to clarify, the scenic byway and the scenic roads are completely different and separate processes.
Aha,
So
well, that's good.
That's what I
news.
was just gonna ask.
So
I had to
if
look
you-
at the term.
If you go on that website that I put on here for New Hampshire DOT, and you go on that and you go, they have a little thing, the difference between scenic road, which is a town city authority to establish those, just like your story said. They will give you the RSAs and the comparison. You also could talk to Dean Eastman directly, because I do know from past conversations that this is an interest of yours, because we've talked about this. And contact him, go to the website and look at it, and then if you still have questions, contact Dean Eastman.
So the scenic roads are away from this
Yes,
Agenda
totally.
21, whoever they are.
I'm not doing Agenda 21. I'm saying scenic roads and scenic byways are a separate process. That's what I'm saying to clarify.
Then there was a town out west that got themselves engulfed in a national park. They never did a thing to them. They said, you can stay here forever. You're just not gonna grow. You're gonna stay the same size. Well, they're still there. Nothing's changed, but that would be all right with me, but not a lot of people.
Okay, I'm with Jeremy now.
Just real
Anything
quick,
else?
I just want to thank, you know,
Cynthia.
Cynthia for coming in and.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my
This is a
pleasure.
PowerPoint presentation, obviously?
Yes.
Is this online somewhere that we could take a look at?
It's not online yet because I just finished it before I
Oh,
got
okay.
here.
Will it be going online that we could take a look at?
Yeah, we can, there's different versions of it. We change it for every community, so
Right.
when we go to Durham, they don't want to see Dover buildings. And
Right, I'm not sure why, but
we try to be respectful.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, really.
You're welcome. If you want to keep this for further conversations, again, my point was just to show that it's all about the colonial development and how we started here. That's what the whole essence of what this was about, and how we developed as communities within this and as peoples.
Can I just ask you one last question?
Yes.
Is this road gonna continue further down this way and further up that way?
Yeah, that was the whole point. So, right now, it doesn't, we would like to have it connected through 85 through Newfields down to Exeter, where Route 27 is and where the Independence Museum is there in town, right in downtown, the sort of mustardy colored building. That is the Independence Byway, but at the Newfields boundary, this becomes the Rockingham Planning Commission, so we can't be doing planning for them, but we're trying to see if they'd be interested in an addition. And the same thing over here, like I said, we were looking at the communities in South Berwick, York, Elliott, Kittery to connect over to Portsmouth and the coastal byways, so that you could make a really big loop.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and here's just something that says, what are the intrinsic qualities? It's right from the website. And then here's another, the National Scenic Byways Program, right from the website. And what you need to consider is that a lot of the stuff that you see on the website for National Scenic Byway pertains only to someone, an entity or a group of communities that would be applying for this program to the National Scenic Byways Program. We're applying to New Hampshire State Scenic Byways, and that's a different process, and Dean Eastman is the guru and administrator of that program and works with the advisory council. So thank you so much for your attention, and I really appreciate your time and your thoughtful questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, B, discussion of Oak Street speed limit reduction, citizen request. That, I believe, is the email that we received in our packets. It was, yeah, with a noisy manhole cover. Anybody have any input on it? They want to reduce the speed limit, but how about fixing the manhole cover?
This letter from Hager,
Yes.
wasn't that just